Hey, what's up you guys, I'm back with another video, and today it'll be finally the Endgame spoiler discussion. So of course there's going to be spoilers in this video, and how it's going to work is I'm going to briefly summarize the movie to the best of my ability, to the best of my memory, and then I'm going to move over to the discussion section. So I'm gonna put the timestamp for the summary below in the description, so you can skip the summary and move on straight to the discussion if you want to do that. So without further ado, let's start with the summary. So the movie starts off with a solid scene of Hawkeye's family, Hawkeye having a good time with his family just before they get dusted. And then right after, they cut over to Tony and Nebula in space. They're playing a little bit of a game, having a little bit of fun, and then they showcase little bits and pieces of Tony and Nebula trying their best to keep alive in space, preventing their ship from blowing up and trying to buy themselves a little bit of flight time. And Tony falls asleep, but then he's awakened by a glowing Captain Marvel who saves them both and she carries the ship all the way back to Earth to meet the remaining Avengers: Black Widow, Hulk, Cap, Rocket, and War Machine. And Tony, he's very happy to see Pepper, but after a little bit of a break, they all rally and discuss at around the table, and Tony Stark takes a huge dump on Captain America, calls him a liar, and is clearly unhappy with the fact that Cap wasn't there for him when he needed Cap the most. Afterwards, a very confident Captain Marvel tells the team that she's off to kill Thanos, but Cap and Widow insist that it's a team effort, and all of the Avengers there have beef with Thanos, and that they should go too. So after a little bit of discussion, Nebula tells them that Thanos which planet he's on, and then they all set off to space to face Thanos once more. And on his planet, they discover that Thanos is severely injured, and Captain Marvel easily overpowers him and puts him in a chokehold, while the team Hulkbuster, Rocket, and Thor swoop in to chop his arm off. And it is then that they realize that Thanos is weak because he had used the Infinity Stones to destroy the Infinity Stones. And the team is horrified to hear this because now they can't reverse the snap with the gauntlet, and an angry Thor decapitates Thanos. Right after this, the movie cuts over to 5 years later with Scott Lang, Ant-Man, finally escaping the quantum realm because a rat just happens to step on the right buttons on the quantum machine module to set him free. Lang then walks around to try and piece together what has happened until he arrives at a memorial site for those who died in the snapping, and he frantically searches for his daughter's name in hopes that it wouldn't be there. He instead is shocked to find that his own name is there, and he quickly rushes over to his daughter's home to find that she is now 5 years older, and it's quite an emotional scene between him and her. It's a pretty awesome reunion. Lang then goes over to the Avengers compound to explain to Black Widow and Cap that for him, only 5 hours had passed, despite 5 years having passed in real time, and that the rules of the quantum realm are different, and that perhaps time travel is possible to, for them to reverse the snapping and make everything okay again. So they go over to Tony Stark with his news for help, and right after the movie introduces Tony Stark's daughter, Morgan. But Tony tells them that it's a pipe dream, that it's laughable, and that they might die from it, and the odds are, they're like 1,000,000,000 to 1. And Cap tries to convince Tony otherwise by saying that this was their second chance, but Tony tells Cap that his daughter Morgan is his second chance. And somewhere here, I can't remember too specifically, Stark looks at an old picture of Peter Parker, and he's inspired to try to do proper calculations for the time travel proposal, and it somehow works. And then he goes on to tell Potts that he had cracked time travel. Meanwhile, Rogers, Lang, and Romanoff go to Banner to ask for help, and they see that Banner has now become one with the Hulk. So he has put the brains and the bronze together, and this new Hulk is very comedic, very bubbly, and very chirpy. So after they convince the Hulk to help, they go back to the compound and they test their time travel machine on Lang, but it doesn't work. It turns Scott into a baby, into an old man, into a kid, and then back to Scott again. And after Cap goes out to reflect for a bit, he chills outside of the compound. Tony arrives soon after with a working time-space GPS, and after a little bit of a conversation with Cap, he finally decides to help the group, but only if they have a proper team. So Romanoff goes off to find Hawkeye and meets him right after he has brutally murdered a bunch of Yakuza guys, and Hawkeye is initially reluctant, but he joins Black Widow in the end. Meanwhile, Banner and Rocket go to recruit Thor in New Asgard, and after speaking with Valkyrie, they find Thor, Korg, and Meek, and Korg and Meek is playing Fortnite, and they see Thor that has let himself go. He's been indulging in beer, food, and is now overweight. Thor is just he looks distraught as hell. Distraught. Sorry, he looks distraught over what happened with Thanos. And after some back and forth, after a little bit of an argument with the Hulk, he finally joins Rocket and the Hulk, and he goes back to the compound to be a part of the Avengers again. So it is then the team discusses and brainstorms about the location of the different stones in the past to figure out which points in time to time travel to, and then they split up into different groups to try and retrieve the stones from the past. Banner, Rogers, Lang, and Stark, they travel back to the first Avengers movie, 2012, New York. Banner visits the Wizard Sanctum in New York and manages to convince the Ancient One to hand over the Time Stone. And Rogers bumps into Hydra agents who have the scepter in an elevator, but he manages to convince them to hand it over by whispering to them, "Hail Hydra." And afterwards, he fights himself from the past, who confuses him for Loki, but he manages to beat him, and then he leaves. Meanwhile, Lang and Tony's attempt at retrieving the Space Stone fails, and Loki escapes with it. Cap and Iron Man then use their last vial of Pym particles to travel back to the 1970s to retrieve the Space Stone, while also stealing Pym particles to travel back to their present. Thor and Rocket go to Asgard in 2013, and after a heartfelt conversation with his mother and stealing the Aether from Jane Foster, they return. Thor also steals Mjolnir from the Thor of that timeline by calling for it. Barton and Romanoff then meet Red Skull and Vormir and argue about who gets to kill themselves for the Soul Stone, and after a brief scuffle, Romanoff commits suicide and Hawkeye receives the Soul Stone. On Morag in the same year, War Machine knocks out 2014 Peter Quill, and then him and Nebula retrieve the Power Stone. But just before Nebula can leave, after War Machine has already returned to the present, her cybernetics are disrupted by the Nebula of 2014, and she is captured by Thanos, who then learns of their little time heist, and he himself is updated on the events of the present day. The 2014 Nebula then travels back into the present time, taking the place of the actual present-day Nebula, and assimilates herself with the Avengers, with them being completely clueless to her antics. And after a brief mourning session over Black Widow's death, Bruce Banner in Hulk form puts on a Stark Tech gauntlet and snaps his fingers, which they believe brings the Dusted back. They however don't have a single moment to breathe, as Nebula brings Thanos' whole ship, his whole fleet from the past, and Thanos fires a barrage of missiles on the Avengers compound, which leaves Hawkeye in the middle of rubble with the gauntlet beside him. Cap's alive. Everyone is somehow alive after this barrage, and then Cap finds himself with Iron Man and Thor wielding both Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, and the three confront Thanos, which they have a brief fight. It's pretty cool, and then the fight also involves Cap being worthy of wielding Mjolnir. Thanos, however, somehow manages to overpower the three and then summons his massive army. Meanwhile, current-day Nebula manages to convince 2014 Gamora to, join her side, and then they try to convince 2014 Nebula to join their side, but 2014 Nebula is a bit of a dick, and after failing to convince her, present-day Nebula kills 2014 Nebula. Yeah, I know, pretty dark. Cut back to the battle between Cap, Thanos, and, Thor and Iron Man. Black Panther arrives through one of Doctor Strange's portals, and then a bunch of other portals to open up to reveal that all of the Dusted Avengers are back, and Cap is now officially backed by an army of Asgardians, Wakandans, Sorcerers, and the Ravagers, and with all of the heroes backing him up, Wasp, Valkyrie, Pepper Potts in her own Iron Man suit. After all of them are lined up behind him, Cap wields Mjolnir once more, and he says, "Avengers, assemble!" And then they rush forward to battle the forces of Thanos' army. And lots of things happen there. This is a massive spectacle. Lots of things are going on. Ant-Man is in his giant form punching a damn Leviathan. You've got Valkyrie in the air throwing spears while riding her Pegasus. And then Scarlet Witch finally confronts Thanos, and she... what happened to Vision in the previous movie, right? So she's over there trying to tell Thanos, hey, you took everything away from me. But this is 2014 Thanos, so Thanos doesn't know her yet, and he's like, I don't even know you. And they both have an exchange of fisticuffs. Thanos is beating up Scarlet Witch, Scarlet Witch is beating up Thanos, and then Scarlet Witch actually manages to overpower him, but she is quickly countered by his usage of his ship, the Sanctuary 2, to fire a barrage of missiles all over the battlefield. But fortunately, Captain Marvel swoops in, and she destroys the ship, single-handedly destroys Thanos' entire ship, which leaves him quite distraught. And she has a brief scuffle with Thanos, Thanos, and she is even able to overpower Thanos, but Thanos is able to pull out the Power Stone in time to blow her away. And this is the final moment. Thanos finally has the completed gauntlet, but Doctor Strange gives Tony Stark the signal, hey, like, this is the one moment. And Tony Stark confronts Thanos once more, manages to trick the Mad Titan, and he steals all of the stones from the gauntlet to make a gauntlet of his own, because you know the nanotech of the Stark suit is very malleable, it can change form, and now Tony Stark has the completed gauntlet, and with one final hoorah, Tony Stark says, I am Iron Man, and he snaps his own fingers. Right after Tony Stark snap, Thanos' army completely fades away. They get dusted themselves, and then they finally cut to Thanos himself getting dusted. Tony Stark, however, can't take the full brunt of the energy of all the Infinity Stones, and he is severely injured. So he lies down in the middle of the battlefield, and Pepper Potts, War Machine, and Spider-Man come to surround him, and all of them, crying because they see Tony Stark in such a terrible state. And Pepper Potts tells him that it's okay, you can rest now. And Tony Stark unfortunately passes away. The movie then cuts to all of the characters that have appeared in the MCU thus far attending a funeral for Tony Stark. And everyone's there. And then after a brief funeral scene, Valkyrie is shown being appointed as the Queen of Asgard, and then Thor joins the Guardians of the Galaxy. The movie then wraps up with Captain America going back in time to return the stones to their appropriate time points, but instead of returning back to the present, he stays back in the past, and he lives out his entire life. He lives a full life that he has wanted to all this time with Peggy Carter. And then they show an old Captain America appearing behind Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Bucky, and then Captain America passes his shield to Falcon and tells him, hey, it's now yours. And then the movie ends with a scene of Captain America dancing with Peggy Carter. Whew, boy, that was quite a mouthful. I hope that was okay for a summary. I really tried my best, okay? So now we can move on to the discussion, okay? First off, the scene with Hawkeye's family getting dusted. I thought that was a powerful scene. That was a solid performance by Jeremy Renner, and that was a pretty good way to start Avengers Endgame. The little interactions between Tony and Nebula and the ship, just before Captain Marvel saves them, I thought that was pretty cute. And Nebula was actually pretty kind to Tony Stark, because Tony was like offering the food to Nebula, say, hey, here, you take this. But Nebula is like, nah, Tony, you need the food more than I do. So her insistence on him eating, it's pretty nice. It really shows the emotional side of Nebula. And I still don't really know how Captain Marvel or the Avengers actually knew how to find Tony Stark up in space. Was she just flying around until she happened to stumble upon them? I don't know, but whatever. It was okay. It was a pretty cool scene. And then the next part, where Captain Marvel carries the ship back, and Tony berating Captain America, calling him a liar. That scene was surprisingly depressing for the MCU, I gotta say. And Tony really wasn't holding back. He was laying it on thick here with Cap. But there was a little bit of an out-of-character line regarding them needing new blood and them pointing to Captain Marvel. Seems a little shoehorned to me. And then the scene afterwards, I was probably the only one who laughed out loud in the cinema when Captain America said, I'm off to kill... it's not Captain America, oh my god, I keep mistaking Captain America with Captain Marvel. But I was the only one who laughed out loud when Captain Marvel said, I'm off to kill Thanos. At this point in time, at that part, specifically, her character to me wasn't that bad in her solo film, but here she was just downright cocky and unlikable. She was a bit of a dick. And they also reuse her lazy explanation of why she hasn't been around, the I've got a lot of planets to go to, they don't have guys like you line. But I did like the little joke about Thanos having a retirement plan. And then the part right afterwards where they went to Thanos' planet to kill him, that part took me a little by surprise, I gotta admit. I didn't expect them to kill Thanos that easily or that quickly, and it did leave me quite curious to see how things would turn out. And the scene started off with Captain Marvel swooping in and putting Thanos in a chokehold, which I thought was pretty damn cool. And then the scene with Thor rushing in to slice his arm off just right after was badass as hell. And then, right after them cutting 5 years later, the scene with Scott reuniting with his daughter here was quite emotionally impactful. Solid performance by Paul Rudd. And the actress that took over as Cassie Lang's older form, I thought she was a bit too old. I think she grew up a little too fast. She looks like 20 now. I think Cassie was like 9 or 10, so she should be 15. But hey, whatever. It still worked. It's still a pretty good scene. And then it was also nice to see that Ant-Man was the catalyst or their source of hope to rally and try to undo the decimation from Infinity War, his little time heist plan, to retrieve all the stones. And it was also nice to see that Tony have a daughter, and the relationship between him and his little Morgan Stark was very cute. It was quite understandable and justified for Tony to initially reject their proposition for a time heist. I, however, thought that it was a little super convenient that he managed to crack the time travel thing so quickly. It happened just like that, just like the snap, It took a day? There wasn't really enough weight to that achievement, and the time travel should be a pretty hard thing to crack, even for a genius like Tony Stark. And hey, they didn't even really show him working with the quantum tech or anything. So, but I digress. I can put something like that aside for the sake of the movie. Also, I did find it funny that Captain Marvel had the "let me speak to your manager" haircut. But jokes aside, her new costume was pretty damn cool. I like the new Captain Marvel design. And the scene right after that where they try to test the time machine, that scene was pretty comedic. We get to see Lang go from a kid to an old man then to a baby, like I said before, and it was a little weird but interesting to see the way that Hulk has gone, how he's so chirpy in Hulk form now. And the interaction between Tony and Steve outside of the compound was nice. It's been a long while since we've seen the two so buddy-buddy with each other, and to add to that, we finally get Cap receiving his iconic shield back. I did not like the vibranium gauntlets he got in Infinity War. And the scene with Hawkeye taking on the Yakuza guys was cool as hell. I thought, although I really liked the samurai fight he had with that one Japanese dude, Hawkeye really looked like he had lost all hope here. You can tell from the performance that was done really well. And that scene was pretty good. And now we enter the worst part of Endgame, the part I hated the most, Thor. I love Thor, but man, they really butchered his character here. Thor is now a fat, drunken, I don't know what to call him, just fat, drunken dude in a shell of his former self, and Endgame treats him like a complete joke. I am completely unhappy with the direction of his character in this movie, and I think it's very disrespectful to the source material and hardcore fans of the character. We had just seen Thor go through an amazing arc in Infinity War, where he went through all that to achieve the creation of Stormbreaker, a weapon that would finally be able to stop Thanos. We should also finally get a chance to see Thor be a proper king to his people, but we don't. And I get it. I really do. I get it. He's racked with guilt over his supposed failure in stopping Thanos' snap, and the direction does make a little sense. But we've had 3 goddamn movies and Infinity War to see this character grow, develop, and suffer. Isn't it time for Thor to show us how the God of Thunder is really like, man? But no, this movie brings Thor down. They nerf his character hard to prop up the other Avengers, and I'll talk about that in the later parts of this discussion. So anyway, back in New York, I also like how the Ancient One is back. Her coming back was pretty neat. I did smile a little when Banner finally got the stone from her, because Banner told her that Doctor Strange willingly gave up the stone to Thanos. It was nice to see that she really trusted Doctor Strange, even though at that point she hasn't even met him yet. And seeing 2012's New York, from the first Avengers was also a nice blast from the past. And I admit I couldn't contain my excitement when I heard Captain America whisper, "Hail Hydra," and to very easily retrieve the case with the scepter. That was amazing development on Captain America's part, and it really shows you how sly or tactical Cap can finally be when he wants to. Captain America versus Captain America was also pretty mind-blowing, and the little "I can do this all day" joke was great. And he also acknowledged his past vulnerability to the name Bucky when he used it against his past self to lower his guard. Also, Ant-Man's right. That is America's ass. Jokes here didn't feel forced, I think, and they didn't feel invasive. Like I said in my spoiler-free review, they were very authentic and natural. Tony and Cap going back to the 1970s was great. I really enjoyed Tony speaking to his father. The conversation between the two was very emotional, and it was nice to see Tony's dad speaking so nicely of Tony before he was even born. But I gotta say, Loki escaping with the Tesseract was pretty neat, but I couldn't care for it. That's probably the setup for the Loki TV series that's coming up on Disney+. And The next part in Asgard, despite my negative feelings towards Thor's character development, I did really like his interactions with his mother. This movie really did its best to rewrite my memories of Thor: The Dark World. But the scene was great. But I'm sorry, okay, you can't convince me otherwise. Thor: The Dark World is still a bad movie. The scene between Black Widow and Hawkeye was dark as hell, man. The two were basically fighting over who gets to commit suicide. I couldn't believe what I was watching, but it was great, dramatic, and well done. However, Black Widow's death was super rushed. They didn't really have time to mourn. I didn't really have time to take in that Black Widow was dead. And Thanos catching wind of their time heist tomfoolery was also pretty damn cool and left me going, ah shit, Thanos is onto them now, they're screwed. I thought their little time heist also went a little bit too smoothly, like them bringing back the Dusted was a little bit too rushed. Maybe it could have been made a little better had there have been more hiccups and if Thanos had found out sooner. Thanos versus Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor was cool, but I have to call bullshit here. This entire sequence made no sense, okay? Now hear me out. Thor was able to overpower Thanos with a completed gauntlet with Stormbreaker, and yet here he's unable to completely wipe Thanos' ass, who now has no gauntlet. Like, Thor now has Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, and he can't beat Thanos. I don't know, that for me really broke immersion and broke the rules that they've set up within their own universe, because like I said, Thor with Stormbreaker and Mjolnir can't take on a Thanos with no gauntlet. I just can't see how this is happening. Thor should be able to wipe the floor with this guy. And like I said before, they nerfed Thor here so they can prop up Captain America to make his Mjolnir wielding scene a lot cooler. And yes, that scene was cool. It was awesome. It was a nice callback to Age of Ultron and also the comics. And it was justified, I felt, but I just didn't like how Cap was so easily able to wield the hammer like a goddamn professional, like he's been wielding it for the past 15,000 years, or like 1500 years, like Thor is, how old Thor is, and call the lightning even, like what? And yeah, I know, whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. But I mean, come on, man, you're just making Thor a lot less special with this. And I'm sure I'll hear a lot of arguments like, oh, but this Thor is weaker because he's fat. Oh, this Thor is depressed, so he isn't in fighting form. But no, I just can't accept those as arguments. I'm so sorry. The fight was badass, but it just made absolutely no sense. But if you throw all the logic out of the window, then yeah, I guess it was okay. And then the part where all the Avengers return, having Black Panther come out of the portal first, I appreciate that. I love the character, and going forward with the MCU, he's one of the only few that I'm actually interested in. The huge spectacle of all the Avengers and the MCU characters lining up was great. I love it. I appreciate that. I don't hate it. Everyone was there. Valkyrie, Wasp, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Ant-Man, Hulk, and even the lesser known characters like Wong were there. It was great to see Spider-Man back, but I felt like the emotional weight of his death in Infinity War was kind of thrown out the window here. The fight that ensues was also fantastical and was of epic proportions, okay? The fight, however, didn't have as much weight or as much impact as the battle for Wakanda did in Infinity War, because here you could kind of 100% tell that they were going to win. There was no doubt in my mind that they were going to win, because Thanos was being portrayed more as a villain in this movie, with him insulting the Avengers and him telling Tony that he'd enjoy wiping his planet. And I like that one scene with Ant-Man in his giant form punching the shit out of one of Thanos' Leviathans. That was awesome. I like that one scene when Pepper and Tony were working together, blasting enemies left and right, but I, however, did not like how Cap was able to wield Stormbreaker too, even though okay, I get it, the comedic scene of him and Thor exchanging Stormbreaker and Mjolnir was cute, it was funny, but they're really doing their best here to make Thor feel a lot less special, and it even looked like Cap was better than Thor at wielding Mjolnir. Come on, guys. Anyway, Scarlet Witch overpowering Thanos felt deserved. That scene felt we deserved that scene. Wanda Maximoff deserved that scene, okay? She deserved to lay the beat down on the Mad Titan, and she's a superhero that was actually powerful enough to do that. That scene was badass. Guys, make a Scarlet Witch movie, please, man. More Scarlet Witch. But I gotta say that one scene with all the female superheroes, it was cool, but it was super duper forced, guys. You couldn't have made it more obvious with how pandering it was. I also didn't know I didn't know if anyone noticed this. I could be wrong, but I think I saw Okoye stabbing Corvus Glaive. Like, they showed her very clearly jamming her spear into Corvus Glaive, which is bullshit, okay? Corvus Glaive should not lose to Okoye. You've already set up this rule in your own universe. Corvus Glaive was able to beat Vision and even able to outbox Captain America in Infinity War, okay? It's like, that shouldn't even be remotely possible. But aside from that, I also like the scene with Valkyrie in the air with her Pegasus just slicing through a Leviathan going, ah! That was goddamn cool. That scene was amazing, okay? More Valkyrie. I love Tessa Thompson. More Valkyrie is appreciated. Anyway, I was also okay with Captain Marvel coming in at the last minute to blow up Thanos' ship. I could tell that they were really trying to make this really triumphant moment akin to Thor's arrival in Wakanda, but it didn't do much for me. It didn't do much for the audience I was with because nobody really cheered. Captain Marvel, however, did have a really badass, cool, brief scuffle with Thanos, and she was actually able to overpower him if not for Thanos' quick thinking and using the Power Stone to blow her away. The fight scene between Captain Marvel and Thanos here was dope, okay? This action was the action here, Captain Marvel action here was way better than her abysmal solo movie. Do more of this, guys. Do more of that. Do more of Carol Danvers fighting people of her caliber, and I will be excited for Captain Marvel too, okay? And lastly, the final scene was Strange hinting at Tony that this was the 1 in 14 million chance, and Tony tricking Thanos by stealing the Stark Tech gauntlet with his own Stark Tech and saying, "I am Iron Man," before snapping Thanos away. This was amazing. This was beautiful. This was a poetic end to Iron Man's story, which started way back in 2008. I knew from the moment that Tony put on the gauntlet, he was done, and that was it for him. Watching Tony being surrounded by Rhodey, Pepper, and Peter really tugged at the heartstrings, man. That got to my heart. It still wasn't cry-worthy, but I gotta admit, I maybe almost teared up. And the choice of words for Pepper's final goodbye for him was genius. Instead of the cliche, "I love you," or the "please don't go, Tony," Pepper went with the "you can rest now," which really showed that Pepper herself was a strong character. And the score for Tony's death was also very good. Excellent choice of music for this scene. And all I can say is, man, I'm gonna really miss Iron Man. I remember watching Iron Man for the first time back in 2008 when I was a kid, and I remember, very vividly my dad's excitement when he was watching that movie. And gosh, I just can't imagine the future of the MCU without this character. We've all come to love Tony Stark. We've grown with Tony Stark, and it's gonna be a little hard for me knowing that with every future MCU film I watch, I'm watching an MCU without Tony Stark, and that just really gets to me. They really did a good job here. That was an excellent, well done death, and all I can say is, man, rest in peace, Tony Stark, and I'm gonna miss you, Robert Downey Jr. The funeral scene for Tony was a little short, though. They could have done a little better to hammer down the fact that Tony Stark is gone. And the "I love you 3000" scene, with him, the recording of Tony Stark just before the time heist, man, that was the top quality scene. His daughter asking for a cheeseburger had me crying internally. I got you there. And I like how they had a callback from Iron Man 1 with this arc reactor that says proof that Tony Stark has a heart. The interaction between Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch was great, and Cap going back in time to live out his life with Peggy was a little rushed, but it felt justified. I think Cap really deserved a good life, and this conclusion for him was bittersweet, but it was pretty good. Also, him passing the shield to Falcon made sense because Bucky don't deserve that shield, man. It was Tony's father's shield, and Bucky damn killed Tony's parents, even if he was mind controlled, okay? And Thor passing over the title of King to Valkyrie was something I could respect, but I really didn't like. But I also guess this means Thor is going to be a part of the future of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he won't be involved with Asgard, which I feel is wasted potential. But, you know, I digress. I'll definitely be watching any future movies with this incarnation of Thor. The interaction between him and Star-Lord arguing over who's the leader was pretty goddamn funny. Chris Hemsworth, you're amazing as Thor, okay? You're still my Thor, despite the awful direction that the movie has put you in. The movie wrap-up was alright, nothing mind-blowing, nothing amazing. I expected to be overwhelmed, but I was just whelmed, and I just couldn't get over the nonsense bullshit fight that they had in the end there, all the logic that was just not making any sense. And, you know, despite that, I just, like I said, I can't imagine a future without Iron Man and Captain America. It's like, and you know, I should be eager to see how it goes, right? I should be eager to see how it unfolds, the future of the MCU, but I'm only mildly interested. And, but anyway, that does leave me a few questions, you know, like with who's going to be the next big bad guy, you know, who's going to be the next villain to replace Thanos, and who's going to lead the new Avengers. Preferably, I'd like the new leader of the Avengers to be Black Panther or Doctor Strange, as these two are intelligent and have leadership qualities. I'd also like to see what they do with Falcon as Captain America. I'd also love to see where Ant-Man goes from here, as Paul Rudd's Ant-Man was one of the best parts of this movie. I was also pretty excited to see the Black Widow film, but she's dead. So is the Black Widow film gonna be a prequel, or is it gonna be like are they gonna bring Black Widow back? I don't know. I'm interested to see where they go with that one. And also, I do have a couple questions about this movie, you know, that I think could be plot holes. Like, or plot holes are really convenient. Like, number one, really, when Thanos was firing that massive barrage in the Avengers compound, everybody survived? I don't know about that one, Chief. That one seems super far-fetched. I don't think, like, everyone survived? Even Hawkeye? Even Rocket? Like, what? I find that a little bit too unbelievable. Also, how does Captain America exactly return the Soul Stone back to the past? Like, does he go to Vormir and then meet the Red Skull? I would have loved to have seen that interaction, like Cap seeing the Red Skull, and Red Skull's like, "Oh my God, it's you, Captain America!" Like, that would have been cool. But no, I think that one could be answered a little easier. The next question that I want to ask is, why didn't the team just go back in time to get more Pym particles so that their operation would have been more foolproof? Like, dudes, you could have done this from the start. Just go back in time to where there are more Pym particles, grab more Pym particles, and then this time heist would have gone a little easier, a little better. Yeah, you know, that one was really... I don't know about that one, guys. You gotta answer me on that one. You know, that could have been done. That could have made everything a lot easier. So, yeah, answer me that. Answer me. God damn it, answer me. But anyway, you know, I think I've said all that needs to be said. You know, if I missed something, do let me know. This is a pretty big movie, which is chock full of references and Easter eggs. So don't get mad at me if I do miss a few, and if I do, leave them down in the comments, and let's get our own little endgame discussion going. I'm eager to see what you guys thought about the movie and this video. I'm sorry if this dragged on for too long, but hey, Endgame is a movie that deserves a thoughtful and drawn out discussion. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.